guys, welcome to the MICAST, the official and only true MICAn podcast. I'm yours truly, Ritvik Rajay, and we are back to give you answers to questions you never thought you had. This episode is very special for all of us who believe in storytelling, for we have with us one of the most acclaimed cinematographers of the country. His professional career spans from being the director of photography for PP Live, co directing the Amazon original dystopian thriller Leila, to winning the National Award for Cinematography. I'm talking about none other than Mr. Shanker Raman. So, Mr. Shankar, welcome to MICA.
Thank you.
So, let's start a little bit about the environment that you are in right now, and how do you feel in the campus of MICA? And everybody talks about how different our campus is and how different our students is. What was your first impression when you came on the campus and you looked around and you saw everything in its own environment? And how did you feel about it?
So I came to MICA for the first time in 2017, I think.
All right.
Yeah. So there was an elective that they invited me to conduct. It was on cinematography, and it was, I think, a 3 or a 4 day 4 day program. So I met the students who had elected to do my course, and there were, I think, about 20 of them. So my first impressions was that I really liked the campus. It reminds me a lot of my college. I went to Stephens.
Yeah.
So I love the brick structure. Love the way it's laid out.
Yeah.
There are plenty of quiet spaces.
Yeah.
I see students sort of inhabiting the environment very comfortably. There seems to be some thought that has gone behind each and every space that has been created. So it's very welcoming, very relaxed, and yeah, I had a great time.
Beautiful. So, how many times have you been at MICA before?
This is my second time.
This is the second time. So, this time I think your course is called Out of the Box.
Yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about that?
So essentially, it comes from looking at paradigms.
All right.
So if I were to simply define what a paradigm is, it's a framework. It's a framework from which we view things. So, for example, there is an ideal way to be. This is what people think. Like there's an ideal man, and there's an ideal woman, and there's an ideal way to work, and there's an ideal way to tell stories. And they might be very useful, but they can be seriously limiting in terms of really being able to expand your creative potential. Usually in limiting paradigms, we get stuck and are not able to have, say, more deeper, relevant conversations. As you know, life throws up all kinds of challenges.
Yeah.
And if we are stuck in those paradigms, then the experience of life is not that great. You end up having to get into this sort of endless battle of right and wrong, good and bad, dominating, avoiding being dominated, validating, invalidating oneself. So one is not really able to focus on the target or the goal that you are seeking. So the title Out of the Box is really about thinking out of the box. So if you look at the box that we are in as a default way of being, then we're talking about out of the box, which is a created way of being. So in that sense, you are causing a paradigm shift. You're creating a new paradigm in which it serves the possibility of you realizing your goals, whatever it is that you want. So in a sense, this workshop is about filmmaking. So there are 4 films being made.
Okay.
4 ad films being made. But let's just call them films right now because the process is very thorough and particular. It's not, the course is not designed specifically to cater to ad filmmaking, but more like storytelling, right? So when you're telling a story, where do stories come from? What are the kind of stories we tend to tell? What are the assumptions we make about people? What are the stereotypes we land ourselves in? These are the things to examine. I feel it's important, more so in today's day and age, to be able to connect with the other, the unfamiliar. Because if I am afraid or distant and sort of if my coping mechanisms arising from fear
Yeah.
and just lack of information, I may not, I may just land myself into, boxed in a corner and not being able to deal with whatever I need to deal with. So, thinking out of the box, therefore, is the commitment of the workshop. It's a place to stand and look at things. So, our natural tendency is to look at it from inside the box, which is to play safe and
Be in our comfort zone.
yes, be in a comfort zone, especially, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Wrong with that, yeah.
Except it may not produce the results you want. So we are seeking to examine that and establishing a way to practice it. So therefore, out of the box.
Wow, that's quite an understanding about the course that we are having here. So, coming from whatever you said right now, it relates to me very much on a personal level as well, because I also write a lot. So whenever I have a block, tend to go back to my comfort zone. So how do you deal with those blocks when you don't see ahead? You don't realize that there can be a step which can be taken, which can take you away from this block, which can release you from those clutches. How do you go out of the box?
This is a very long answer, but I'll try to keep it very concise.
Sure.
The first thing I would recommend is to learn to accept that you are blocked. That's the first thing. It's like saying you have fever, but it's probably just a tummy upset. And then you go about doing your work. Your assumptions that you are here may not be true.
Agreed.
Like you don't know where you're on the map. You want to go to Calcutta and you're booking a ticket from Delhi, but you're actually in Bombay. You're never going to be able to get to Cal. So that is the biggest drama here. There is a lot of significance we attach to being blocked. There's a sense of self-pity, self-loathing, and all those.
Rather than walking towards against it, we walk right towards the block.
But that's not conscious.
That's not conscious.
So in that sense, no one's to blame. It's sort of an automatic response. So if you look at it as stimulus and a response, there's an automatic response to stimulus. For instance, the stimulus could be you need something delivered in 3 days. And your understanding of that may have been you have at least a month. So it's a threat, right? But our coping mechanisms with threat is usually to fold in and to make up stories justifying why we don't need to keep our promises. So the way you make promises is maybe I'll keep it, maybe I won't. So there is an essential inauthenticity that blocks us. There is no block. So the narrative around that is simply about why it's okay to be blocked and therefore stay there and I will figure it out. And the struggle is that I need to get my work done. Look, if you don't need any work to get done in a certain time frame, then the question of block doesn't arise. So maybe you don't have a time frame set. Maybe you don't have any accountability here. Maybe you're the only one who's talking to yourself. So it's important to get into conversations with other people. Now there could be a block there too, right? So it's not about really, I'm not talking about positive thinking here. I'm talking about transforming the way you work by simply getting that you're stuck. Unless you get you're stuck, you can't only then you stand a small chance to become unstuck. The work is the same.
Yeah.
Writing is writing, conversations are conversations. You know exactly what you need to communicate.
Agreed.
But there is this imaginary threat that it may not get delivered, they may not appreciate you, they may not understand you, they may not like what you're saying, and what's the point, right? So once you get that this seems to be you're on autopilot, your responses are autopilot, then you can create a new paradigm to operate from, and that's the paradigm of what's possible. For example, I was telling the students that we made a list on, I wrote out a list of things on the board. I asked them, what are the qualities that you seek in your collaborator? Like, what would you like them to have? What kind of qualities would you like them to possess? So they listed out a whole lot of things, including authenticity, integrity, truthfulness, kindness, fun, and all the good stuff. So I asked them, do you know anybody who fits all of this? that you have met in your life. Then I ask them, are you all of this all the time? So what are your expectations from yourself, from people? I think part of our education system, the challenges of that is we're not really taught how to be with other people. And you're just expected to perform amazingly well the moment you get into a job or in a group dynamic. People don't know how to be with other people or be with themselves. So I think it's a very strong component that needs to be addressed as part of our education system because that's where the real work lies.
Agree.
I mean, learning to know and learning to do is a walk in the park.
Yep.
You just know that. But learning to be with other people is very critical. So once you get that, okay, so you may not be equipped, it eases up, right?
Agree.
You don't have to resist that.
Agree.
So the block is not the problem. Fighting against the block becomes the problem. It's like pushing against a wall. The wall pushes back at you.
Wow, those are some great insights, I think. And the last thing that you talked about, especially, I have seen that in especially elder people when we were kids and when we were given examples of students who would just get holed up in their room and just pore over books, and they were hailed as the great learners and the great whatever names they were given, and we were hailed as you spend so much time outside, you spend so much time with people, you spend so much time with your friends. And now it's been completely reversed because they see how the industries are changing and how you need to be good with people. And now if they see somebody holed up in their room, they have a very different perspective about it. They talk about how those people are not exactly the best versions of managers that you can have in the industry, because you need to first manage people and then you can get any work done. So, now moving forward to my kind of students and your own professional journey as well. MICA is famous for students for with very diverse, professional and personal journeys of their own. Given from what I have heard, you have had a very, diverse journey as well. One day in physics in St. Stephen's, and the other day you have FTI, Film and Television Institute in Pune, and then now direction. However, people in India are still struggling, with change in their professional careers, and facing change in the way that they, if they're passionate about something and it is different from mainstream, then they have doubts about themselves, their own professional careers, and actually facing the facts there are not enough opportunities for passion in India, especially for arts and culture. So, what was it that specifically motivated you to take such a drastic step in your professional career? And is there any suggestion for anybody from any age group if they wish to change or take an about turn in their career? How can they do that?
Here's what I'll say. Firstly, it's perfectly okay if you don't know how to do this. It's perfectly fine. Because what happens is that a lot of people I meet, they say, I'm confused about what to do.
Yeah.
I feel that confusion is a way to explain that you don't know, whereas it doesn't need an explanation. If you don't know something, you don't know it.
Agreed.
What's the problem? So in fact, confusion sort of, it's a way of saying I'm confused, so I don't have to feel bad about it. Excuses also, it has the tinge of interpretation that it's bad to give excuses. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not talking about good or bad here. I'm just sort of making an observation on human behavior. See, we all have snap judgments. We can't help it. You look at a picture and you'll have a snap judgment about it. It's our mutual snap judgments that we keep dealing with. So when you said there are opportunities lacking, no one's really tested the veracity of that. It's more a snap judgment that opportunities are lacking. So when you operate from a snap judgment, it's a hypothesis, and invariably you'll prove it. So you can't find what you're not looking for. So the question is, what are you looking for? If you cannot articulate that, if you don't learn to articulate that, then you're going to feel handicapped. So it's important for you to learn to articulate what you want. Now here's my sense of it. What you feel, and the domain of feeling and emotion doesn't exist in language, which is why it's hard to talk about it. So the what to do and the how to do it is still accessible. Once you're in a game, you figure out what do we have to do. We have to record this podcast.
Yeah.
How to do it? You get a recorder, you put a bunch of guys in a room and you record it. Why are we doing this? That's the fundamental question. So what drives you is the why. You want to make a contribution, you want to contribute, you want to share your learnings, you want to offer someone a space to be able to hold their experiences and and get for themselves that it's possible. A lot of people tend to get so deeply resigned in life that if you offer a possibility to them, they get upset. And it's counterintuitive. There are all kinds of people in all kinds of situations in the world. So what I'm saying is, I didn't think these things through. Okay, I didn't sit down and say, oh, I'm going to figure it all out and then I'll do it. No, it doesn't work like that. Perhaps in hindsight, what I did was I just set out and said, all right, let's do this. I meet somebody and I said, all right, what do you want to do? They say, I want to make a film. I said, all right, let's make it together. So we don't know how. When you look at, 2-year-old kid, who are learning to walk, and then they walk. How did they walk? Like really, why did they choose that particular moment? How? You don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, so only thing you can perhaps inquire there is, and maybe even align to, is that they were able to expand their personal spaces to include the possibility of walking. They did that. You created the possibility of creating this distinction called balance when you got onto a bicycle. So no matter how much you instruct someone on how to ride a bicycle, they got to do it.
Agreed.
But you can do it from fear, or you can do it from a stand to break through something. So when you do it from fear, which is typical of us, I mean, it's common. There's no shame there.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like the default mode. When you do it from fear, even if you're successful, you won't really be satisfied because you may feel like you've not really overcome the fear. But when you do it from a place of a stand to create something, to perhaps make an impact on something, regardless of the fear, you are able to do it despite the fear. So in my experience, fear doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It actually only goes up. The bigger you play, the bigger the stakes. So if you don't put something at stake, you don't really have a game.
Here I'm reminded a very beautiful quote by yourself. Every day you come back and you want to die or go away, but it is the only way I can meet the world and make sense of it. This is something which is very it resounded with me especially very much because it's the way that even I try to connect with the world by writing about it. So I've been a huge fan of cinematography for a long period of time. I've been a huge fan of Nolan movies, and then in India it's very hard to find very good cinematography. But then I'm very taken back by good cinematographers and cinematography. So how the right frame can change the entire perspective of a story. It's very intriguing, very interesting. So let's dive a little deeper and answer a question which marketers, I think we all should know. I believe is what your idea of a story is. How do you perceive a story, and what do you expect to see and capture through a lens?
Okay, I think fundamentally a story is story sort of exists or comes up in this gap between what you expect and what really happens. That's the domain of story. So in that sense, we all have stories.
Yeah.
We have stories about success, failure, joy, sorrow, whatever. And you sort of expect life to turn out a certain way, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
So you have a story. We are not designed to look at things the way they are. So we have to make sense of them. We have to explain it to ourselves. We have to understand life. Life doesn't make any sense. What sense does it make?
It doesn't at all.
So life doesn't make sense, but fiction has to. So when you tell a story, ultimately the purpose of the narrative is perhaps to, I don't know, touch somebody's life or inspire them. See, a shift in perspective is what touches people.
Agreed.
We are all, I suppose we all have a sense that we know everything and we know it all.
Yeah.
When I walk into an auditorium to watch someone's movie, I suppose I'm just walking in saying, all right, what do you have for me? But when I walk out, if I have tears in my eyes and I can't hold them back, what really happened? I thought I knew everything, but something altered.
Yeah.
So that's the power of storytelling. And storytelling is a very important element of stories themselves. Like it's the telling of it. Most stories have already been told. Most themes have already been covered,
Yeah.
at least to my understanding. But storytelling is really where the craft meets conversations, and you create conversations, and you craft them for it to be delivered a certain way. And that's where the practice lies, right? That's where the really the domain of filmmaking lies. I'm referring to filmmaking, but I suppose it's true for anything. I mean, as my mother, as a homemaker, did the same thing.
Yeah.
She had a bunch of guys to take care of, and it wasn't easy. Every single day, where do you stand and create out of nothing? Because that's the experience of life, right?
Yeah.
That there is nothing, and but we're not okay with that. There is nothing. We're constantly fighting that sense of nothing, because we want to keep filling it up with something so that my life has meaning. So since we are automatically obsessed with creating meaning in our lives, storytelling offers you a chance, an opportunity to create meaning that makes a difference, that actually matters.
The way that I think we see at stories is more about, from a layman's perspective, I think it's more of an entertainment rather than filling the gaps in our own understanding and on our own judgment. What you talked about, filling those gaps and trying to make more sense out of the world, which we can't see like it is, but we try to make sense of it and we try to define it in our own ways. And I think those stories are helping us in doing that a little more. So, do you feel you're doing something different in this, world of flashy Bollywood movies and item numbers? Through your movies, through your cinema, are you trying to convey a different type of message to the people out there?
I don't wake up in the morning and say I'll do something different. It's the I have some very basic guidelines today that I follow. If I feel like I'm just complaining about things and finding that this doesn't exist, that doesn't exist, or this is not there, and what is going on, so I just go out and create a way to create that. So I focus on that. I focus on being in action, because I've tried that. I've tried to do things differently, as a starting point. I've tried to do things other ways as starting points, and there was no freedom and satisfaction at the end of it. I think freedom and satisfaction needs to be a starting point. You can't create something if you don't allow yourself to be free to create. Being free to create doesn't mean you can say anything you want. Look, there are consequences to actions. We all know that.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
We live in environments, there are rules to the environment.
Yeah.
And the question is, you can be provocative, you can be disruptive, but the point is, what really needs to be delivered needs to be delivered.
True.
That's important.
True.
If that gets done, then the consequences don't matter. You could get trolled for something that you did, but it could be a really powerful thing that you did and people appreciate it. So perhaps the number of people who are going to appreciate it and tell you that it made a difference to them will be far greater than the people who will troll you.
Yeah.
But that risk is always there.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that life is inherently risky. Like Helen Keller said, I mean, life is either a daring adventure or nothing.
How do you see advertisements and filmmaking as different mediums of telling a story? What do you think is the stark difference between making an advertisement, thinking about an advertisement, and thinking about a film, a full-fledged movie? And have you explored that space ever? And if not, would you like to? And if there is any suggestions for us while thinking about an advertisement, how do we look about it? How do we make anything new?
Okay, look, when you say advertising, there is an already preconceived notion about it
Yep.
for all of us.
Yep.
You say advertising, I'll think something, she will think something, he will think something. So
Agreed.
that's fine. It's important to first get what it is that we're agreeing to. That's the first thing. Because if you don't have that conversation, then we're kidding ourselves.
Agreed.
There's going to be a lot of gap.
Miscommunication, misunderstanding.
Yeah, it's just a lot of gap. That's largely the work.
Yeah.
What the hell are we agreeing to? And that's very, very particular, specific work. It is very specific in language. Just because you say, oh, that's a cool product, or that's a cool look, that's a cool way of doing it. I don't know, but you don't know what I think cool is or isn't, or she thinks cool is or isn't. We need to be able to define it and specify it. Now, a lot of people have been working with each other for years and they kind of get it, and that's okay. You know, they're a lot more free flowing with our ideas.
Yeah.
But when you're starting off, it's important to be clear what is expected, what is the client's expectation, what are they really saying. Now, a lot of the things that they may say, you may not like.
Agreed.
It may not fit in your sensibility or taste. But here's what I'll say, that, you know, that's the business. I can give you an example. I can share with you something that happened. A friend of mine, he's a great musician, and he was he had to compose a score for an ad film. And he called me one day and he was very low. He said that he had invited all these folk artists from Rajasthan, and that's the score he wanted to build, and etc. etc. And the client didn't like that. And the client asked him to do something else. So he was very dejected about it. So, you know, and we talked a little bit more, and, you know, what got created there was, you know, he plays the guitar, and he, you know, he's I could say he plays with a certain level of mastery of that instrument. When you actually inquire, how did you become a master? So he said that he just put in the hours. So unless you've put in the hours, you won't have those skills.
Agreed.
So you got to put in the hours of dealing with clients, being with people, having conversations, and if that is not part of your training, then there is a huge chunk missing. Just because you're selling something doesn't mean that people are going to buy it or like it, or so there is also this domain of knowledge that we carry around with us, because we've been told that we should be people of knowledge, right from our childhood. So knowledge is everything, knowledge is king, whatever. But here's the problem with knowledge. Now that you know it, there's no other way to know it. And if someone disagrees with you, what good is that knowledge going to bring you? So I think if I were to really leave somebody with something, you could consider coming from ideas. And ideas are infinite.
Agreed.
Ideas are like a clothes on a rack. If it works for you, you get it. If it doesn't, you put it back. So there's no harm done.
So, is there any way to differentiate between the storytelling in an advertisement and a film? Or is it the same craft, just in different formats?
No, they are distinctly different. Ad filmmaking is not feature filmmaking. And they're two different avenues completely. And that's okay. You just need to understand what the dynamics are. That's why we teach it. And if you're better informed as to what the requirements are and what the expectations are and what need to be fulfilled, then you are better aligned with it. But at a very fundamental level, both are group dynamics. At any given point in time, you're dealing with 150 people. So I think that's something I would talk about more today than how to make a shot. because everyone knows how to make a shot, or kind of.
They can learn in different ways, but
I mean, even if you don't know how to make a shot, you can get somebody who does.
yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is, how will you work together?
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
think about HR, right? Like you have an organization and everybody knows their stuff, but everybody hates each other. So who is there to manage people? So management really, I mean, when you're talking about management, something occurred to me. See, normally we end up managing by result. Something happens, you manage.
Yep.
Something happens, you manage. You always feel like you're at the effect of things. But we're talking about managing for a result, which is why I think in MICA, you have the management section and you have the CCC. You guys need to meet because tomorrow you're going to be serving clients
Yeah.
and these guys are going to create for you.
Yeah.
If you don't talk to each other, you can forget about it. About quality of life. You'll make money, you'll make whatever you'll make, right? But you want to tell powerful stories, you got to create with the people in each department. They need to understand what your struggles are in managing, and you need to get their struggles in creating.
I think MICA does try to bridge that gap, and actually, we have a couple of projects in our start itself when we join the course. We have a course called the Photo Novel, where we collaborate with CCC as well as our own PGP students, and we create something out of co-creation and co-ideation and everything else. So I think MICA does try to bridge that gap in one way or the other, because I think we understand that it is important ultimately to, in one way or the other, be in touch with your entire organization, the people who are most needed at one point or the other. Talking about a little bit about the new avenues of platforms of actually storytelling, where we have OTTs are coming in, and new age stories coming in with Leila, and Gurgaon was also a very landmark movie where you showed the reality of what goes behind the walls. And so how do you perceive that as a focal point, or as a milestone in Indian storytelling, especially with the OTT platforms coming in? And with, there's another quote by yourself that I like to write stories about nobodies. I like to make stories about nobodies, and that is something which is very necessary in India, because we have been talking about politicians and we're talking about rich and affluent families, but we are not talking about the common man enough, I think. And that is something which I think you have been focusing on a lot in your career. So how do you see that changing with the help of OTT and new age storytelling?
Well, I would say they're great because there's just that much more work, more avenues for exhibition, exhibiting your work. OTTs also, I mean, you have the series format,
Yeah.
and of course you have the feature format. And series, as you know, is just, it can go on for seasons, and so there is a way to expand a very simple idea into something really big. It's this, actually, you know what, the story doesn't have to be big. The story doesn't have to be big, it has to be yours. And I think this new this coming in of the OTTs and all kinds of platforms gives people, perhaps who are on the fringes, the opportunity to tell their stories. Because I think there's a market for that now. People are interested in all kinds of stories, in all kinds of content. And these, in that sense, Bollywood had a certain, whatever, framework.
Yeah.
And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And there is a market for it. But the risk there is for the coming generations to think that this is reality, that this is the norm. And it isn't. It's what sells. And that doesn't mean that there are other things that can't be sold, that can't be shared, that can't be. It's more difficult because there's financing and there's all kinds of things, conversations around money that come in. I think that's why organizations like MICA, especially management schools, need to reinvent their programs aligned to how they can raise money to tell stories about the other. Because if you are someone who is a target audience for those stories, they're not coming till you're going to do something about it. That's largely been my experience. All the 7 films, 8 films that I've done, made, whatever, especially the independent films, nobody wanted to produce them. Nobody even thought they were film worthy. Okay, so the fact that they are here has made a difference, an irreversible difference. So I think it's important for our, finance people to start looking at contributing to what they want to see.
Wow, I don't think so. Anybody has thought like that before, taking finances into question and asking them what they want to see, and talking
Because
with
they have the
finances.
same complaints. The problem is that when you have money,
Yeah.
the game's over. Because you have there's nothing else at stake for you. You will never put your peace of mind at stake.
True.
Because you have money. Because you think that money will buy you everything and you can buy peace of mind. And it's not even a conscious thing. That's the challenge. The people who don't have money have, in that sense, much fuller interactions with inventing and discovering and creating things. I'm not generalizing here.
Yeah.
But I'm saying at a fundamental level, that's a challenge.
Agreed. I think we have had some beautiful, deep insights today, and I think I will be listening to this podcast specifically for days now. And I think it will be very hard for us to edit it as well because there is an insight in every line, I think, and there's something to look forward to in every line. It was great talking to you, Shankar, and it was amazing meeting with you and listening to you. I read so much about you, and then coming to finally talk to you and listen to you personally, I was having some expectations, and I think it has exceeded. You have certainly exceeded them, and it was beautiful, interacting with you.
Thank you.
And I hope you have a great time at MICA for the rest of your days, and you keep coming back for us.
I will.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
We look forward to your movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. We look forward to your stories.
Thank you.
It was great meeting you again, and we hope to meet soon.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.